A boss be rising, BBTV's igniting, turn the volume up, yeah, the whole world's invited, from the gravel road to the neon dream, she built an empire out of broken wings. Boss be rising, sky ain't even the ceiling, when she hits go live, everybody feels it.
All right, welcome back. Jukebox Journey. It's Saturday night, and if y'all are as boring as I am, you're here with me tonight, right? So, Jukebox Journey is where we don't run discographies, we don't rank hits, and we don't do nostalgia tours. This is the show where we trace human connections. Who met who broke with who replaced who survived who, and how those relationships kind of quietly rewired the entire careers. Okay. Tonight we're talking about Seether. I promised that last week. It is definitely a Seether night. And full disclosure, before we even get started, yes, I already like Sean Morgan because, yeah, it's more than average. Okay. I'm a Morgan too. That's the way it goes. So clearly, I'm biased towards people who survive chaos and keep rebuilding, as does a Morgan. That's just science. Now, Seether's story isn't about one explosion moment, it's about relocation, fallout, rehab, replacements, producers stepping in, and a band repeatedly standing at the edge and deciding not to disappear. They didn't come out of Los Angeles or New York. They started in Pretoria, South Africa, under the name Saron Gas. Smart, cool name. So with Sean Morgan, bassist Dale Stewart, and drummer Dave Coho, three people trying to export a career from the other side of the world. And that distance, it really shaped everything because they had to be self sufficient early with self released recordings. And you know what? Constant local touring until the industry relationships in the US pulled them across continents into Wind Up Records. And it forced a rebrand as Seether. So that move didn't just change their name, it changed the pressure and the lineup shifts. Coho exited. Pat Callahan took the drummer seat. And suddenly, the chemistry that worked in Pretoria had to survive label expectations. Yeah. American touring schedules, right? And far more attention than they'd ever faced before. Then came another relationship that altered the public narrative entirely. Sean Morgan's involvement with Amy Lee from Evanescence. We know who she is, right? And when that collapsed, it spilled into statements, interviews, lyrics, rehab announcements, and long silences that fans tried to decode in real time. And that personal collapse ran alongside a professional one because in 2006, Sean entered rehab, and inside the band that forced a reset where Dale Stewart stayed anchored, drummer Nick Oshiro joined. Let's see, management relationships shifted, touring plans were reconsidered, and the central question stopped being how big can this get and became, can this version of the band hold? Producer relationships became another pivot. When they worked with Brendan O'Brien, known for pushing artists hard, really hard in the studio, which introduced stricter discipline, an outside authority shaping the process. Later, guitarist Troy McLawhorn, yes, The same Troy who had played with Evanescence entered the lineup, adding an ironic layer to earlier history and for forcing professional coexistence with complicated context in the room. And drummer Johnny Humphrey eventually replaced Oshiro, continuing the pattern of structural rather than cosmetic changes that rebalance touring chemistry and, you know what, created roles too. And maybe the biggest relationship shift of all wasn't between the two people, but between the band and its future. Because Sean Morgan's sobriety changed the operating system. Reliability replaced volatility. Tours stayed intact. Albums got finished, and the machine stopped threatening. And it wasn't going to collapse anymore mid-cycle. So tonight, that's the thread we're following, okay? Not how loud they were. Not how many records they sold, but how many times the people inside Seether had to stand at a crossroads and decide whether to build again. So before we get into it real quick, I'd like to show you a little something if you don't mind. I'd love it if you go over and see my brother and sister. Go check them out. Check out the Iron Sharpening Iron universe, and I shall return very, very shortly. Forgive me. All right, now I'm back. Sorry about that. Okay, let's get into this. All right. Now, what I have here is a few things, and we are going to fix it up real quick. And over here, because I do have a video for this one. So, Seether's early years are a case study in how geography alone can shape destiny. Because when Sean Morgan and Dale Stewart were building music in Pretoria, South Africa, they weren't just competing with local acts. They were competing with an entire global industry that existed an ocean away. And that distance, it forced them into a DIY mentality much earlier than most bands who come up inside major U.S. cities. They recorded what they could afford. And forgive me, hello, Plus Sister. And hello, Madison. Thank you for being here. Missed you, Plus Sister. I hope everything's well. Oh, I'm having issues with internet, so I'm just trying to make sure everything's together. Pardon me. We are having quite a storm right now. It's nothing but ice, of course, which is worse because, snow, of course, it accumulates, but ice, it breaks. Go figure. So if I cut out, you understand, please, that I am having some really bad weather. I am in the heart of Texas right now, north central Texas, and we're getting it good. Okay. So, they recorded what they could afford, right? They distributed their own material toured relentlessly inside a relatively small national circuit, and then they uh, relied on word of mouth rather than radio infrastructure. So that environment made personal relationships inside the group unusually intense, because when you are thousands of miles from the center of power, your bandmates aren't just creative partners. They are your transportation, your marketing department, your booking agents, and sometimes your housing, which is why the original Sarin Gas lineup functioned more like a survival unit than a traditional rock group. But even in that early stage, the first fractured lines were already forming around ambition and stress, because Sean Morgan was, well, openly determined to leave South Africa and break into the American market, while other members were still weighing whether that kind of relocation was realistic or even desirable. And those conversations weren't hypothetical. Pardon me. They were tied to visas and money and family pressure and the simple fear of uprooting an entire life for a gamble. And that tension, it sits underneath the story long before any label deal ever appears. One of the lesser talked about details from that era is how deliberately the group studied the American rock system from, well, afar, not just sonically, but operationally, tracking which producers mattered the most. So, how radio worked and which labels were willing to gamble on overseas acts, which I can probably guess is probably not many. And, that research eventually paid off when their early recordings circulated beyond South Africa and landed in the hands of intermediaries connected to Wind Up Records. But the path there wasn't a straight shot. It involved months of uncertainty, relocation conversations that dragged on without contracts, and a name that suddenly became a problem, because sarin gas was not something a US label wanted to market in the post 9/11 environment. So, forcing the group into a rebrand that felt externally, I guess, imposed rather than organically chosen, and becoming Seether was not just cosmetic, it was symbolic of how much control they were already ceding in exchange for access, a trade off, okay, that would echo repeatedly later in their career. When the band finally moved to the United States, the stress, it multiplied, or rather than disappeared. So, because new relationships entered the picture pretty much immediately, managers, label executives, producers, visa attorneys, and each of those connections carried authority over the group's future. That influx of voices, it changed internal dynamics overnight. Suddenly, decisions that used to be made in a rehearsal were now, I guess, filtered through conference calls and marketing departments. And for drummer David Coho, that shift coined with his exit from the brand, a moment that often gets summarized quickly in histories, but represented the first time that the original survival unit broke apart under industry pressure. And replacing a founding member at that stage isn't just a personal swap. It forces the remaining members to ask, whether versions of the group that got them across the ocean still exist, or whether they've already become something entirely different, something else. So Pat Callahan stepping in on drums marks the beginning of, pardon me, Seether operating in a state of ongoing adaptation. And what made that difficult was, you know what? They were adapting in public under label timeless or timelines and tour schedules that just left little room for slow internal healing. And that pace created an environment where personal stress could hide itself its pardon me, inside professional productivity for a while. Every time it starts kicking up behind me, I'm starting to think, oh, my pipes, oh, my pipes. It's the only thing I'm worried about right now in this mess. What do you think it is? You mean the video or behind that? Bacon sausage? Wow. Thanks, JC. Glad to have you. All right. There you go. I'm here. Because as long as shows were happening and records were finished, underlying problems, they could postpone rather than solve. And that postponement culture is one of the quiet threads that runs through the band's next few years because it's it set up a pattern where crises didn't erupt suddenly, they kind of accumulated, right? And Sean Morgan's struggles with alcohol and drugs grew in parallel with rising visibility, which meant that by the time fans noticed instability, the internal circle had been negotiating around it for far longer. So, another detail that often gets overlooked is how isolated the band still felt, even after making it into the US system, because they were foreigners navigating an industry with, different norms and accents and legal systems and expectations, which reinforced dependence on managers and label staff who could translate that world for them. And that dependency is a double edged sword. It provides access, but also reduces autonomy. And inside Seether, it sharpened debates about who should be trusted and whose advice carried the most weight, especially when commercial goals, I guess, conflicted with personal well being. Those debates laid the groundwork for later confrontations when Sean eventually entered rehab in 2006 because that decision did not come out of nowhere. It was the endpoint of years of friction between keeping the machine running and acknowledging that something fundamental inside it was breaking. What makes this early period so important is that nearly every later chapter in Seether's history echoes these same themes: relocating versus stability, outside authority versus internal control, loyalty versus replacement, and survival versus collapse. And those patterns, they were baked in long before the band became a tabloid fixture or a headline magnet. They were present when three musicians in Pretoria were trying to decide whether to gamble everything on a transcontinental leave, when name change signaled the first compromise with a corporate system, when a founding drummer exited under mounting pressure, and when substance struggles were quietly negotiated behind the scenes while tours rolled on. And, that's why Seether's story doesn't unfold as a series of shocking twist so much as a slow burn and like a chain reaction, where every future crisis is connected to structural choices made at the very beginning. Choices about who gets to make decisions, how much control is surrendered for opportunity, and how long a group can postpone reckoning before it becomes unavoidable. Sounds like a scary deal to me. Don't know that I'd want that job, really. So, the period, I guess, that most reshaped Seether's public narrative, it didn't come from a lineup change or a producer swap, but from Sean Morgan's personal relationship with Evanescence singer Amy Lee, because that connection inserted the band into a cultural spotlight they hadn't really fully chosen yet. And it happened while Sean's substance abuse issues were escalating behind the scenes, creating a collision between private instability and public visibility that made every move feel amplified. What often gets simplified later is how intertwined those two tracks really were, because the relationship breakdown didn't just happen and then rehab followed. They overlapped in messy, uncertain ways, with statements released, interviews parsed by fans, and long stretches where the band said very little while management tried really hard to stabilize touring commitments. Really hard. And inside the group, those months, they were dominated less by gossip, more by logistics, really. By whether Sean would be able to perform consistently, whether insurance and promoters would stay on board. That's a rough one, too. Whether dates needed to be canceled quietly, and whether the group could keep recording while its frontman was visibly unraveling. And those are the kinds of pressures that don't show up in liner notes, but, well, they dominate internal conversations. One of the more obscure, but I guess more revealing aspects of that era is how carefully Seether and their team tried to manage public silence, because every comment risked becoming a headline, right? It's true for anybody in the entertainment industry, I would think. And in the mid 2000s, that kind of scrutiny, it was magnified by online fan communities dissecting lyrics and message board posts, turning artistic output into forensic evidence of personal conflict. That forced Sean and the band into a reactive posture where even, routine promotional appearances carried landmines. And that constant vigilance, it fed the cycle of stress that was already fueling substance abuse, which in turn it deepened tension within the group, especially for Dale Stewart, who remained the longest serving constant and often functioned as an internal stabilizer while chaos kind of swirled externally. And those dynamics, they hardened during the months leading up to Sean's decision to enter rehab in 2006, a moment that has since been framed as inevitable, at the same time as loaded with uncertainty, because rehab meant halting momentum, risking label confidence, and, publicly acknowledging problems that the band had been trying to contain. That kind of admission can fracture a group just as easily as it can save it. So inside Seether, rehab, I'm sorry, what's wrong with me right now? I just can't talk. I don't do word. Okay, so rehab forced what had been background negotiations into the foreground because suddenly, the question wasn't just whether Sean would recover personally, but whether the band could survive structurally if he didn't. And those conversations included management, right? Label representatives and touring partners, all weighing in on timelines and contingencies. Wow, I actually said that one. And then I hit the reset button on my notes. Pardon me. Oh, yep, this is going to be one of those nights, I guess. Y'all forgive me. I can't believe there's so many people in here right now watching me make a fool of myself. Okay. Yeah, I was pretty close to the bottom, I'm sure. Please forgive me. Don't leave. I'm not crazy. I'm just lost. Okay, so almost there. Come on. While the remaining members had to decide how much patience they could extend without sacrificing. I feel like an idiot right now. Pardon me. Their own careers and drummer Nick Oshiro's presence during this period becomes important not just as a lineup note, but as part of the band's attempt to maintain maintain continuity. I can't talk. I don't get it. There goes everybody. While everything else felt unstable. I'm ruining this one. Sorry, y'all. And that continuity was fragile because it relied on hope that Sean would return ready to work in a healthier way. A hope that wasn't guaranteed at the time. Another detail that tends to get glossed over in how rehabilitation didn't magically resolve all creative or interpersonal tensions, because sobriety changes dynamics just as much as addiction does. Shifting power balances, communication patterns, and expectations. And that adjustment period, it required renegotiation across the board, from rehearsal discipline to touring routines to how conflict was handled inside the group. And those renegotiations, they coincided with lingering fallout from the Evanescence connection, which meant that, professional interactions in the wider rock community now carried a personal history that couldn't simply be erased, adding a layer of complexity to future collaborations and lineup. It moves, pardon me, lineup moves that would come years later. Okay. What makes this phase so pivotal is that it created a fork in the road where Seether could easily have stalled out permanently. I mean, boom, gone. Because plenty of bands don't survive that. Not that combination of addiction crisis, romantic fallout, and public scrutiny, especially when it all unfolds. Um, while a career is still climbing rather than safely established. And the fact that Seether continued forward after 2006, it wasn't automatic. It was the result of a series of decisions to recommit, restructure and accept outside oversight in ways that hadn't been before. And that willingness to accept discipline from producers and managers and internal rules becomes the through line of their next chapter, which is where we start seeing the group trade volatility for longevity, even if that trade comes with its own tensions. Okay. Oh my goodness. Y'all have to forgive me tonight. I don't know what my problem is. I truly don't. It's just this weather, and it's baby butt weekend too. So we're gonna come back over here for right now. So before pardon me, before we roll into our little break, don't go anywhere because I'm going to debut something brand new right now, okay? That we've been building behind the scenes. I've worked so hard on this one, y'all. Please pay attention. This is the very first case for B Ninja. Okay? And it's dropping right now for the first time anywhere. So watch this one all the way through. And y'all tell me in the chat whether you're calling Honey or Stinger, because it's still there. When we come back, I'm reading those. So this is a longer break, just a tad than usual, okay? But it's on purpose, and I promise it's worth it. Grab a drink, stretch your legs. Gonna rest my voice just for a bit and stay right here because the Hive is about to speak for the first time. And if you like it, come on, y'all, let me know in the chat. I will run it again for you. Here we go.
Tonight, the Hive recorded a new incident. Not a headline, not a rumor, a fracture.
Somewhere between loyalty and ego, between apology and entitlement, a human decided the rules didn't apply to them anymore, and the ripple reached us.
Honey or Stinger? Choose carefully. I am Boss B, commander of the Hive Order. When disputes escalate beyond reason, when lines blur until nobody remembers who crossed first.
Here is the case. A man borrowed something important from a friend. Not a car, not a jacket, but access. A password. A shared account favor that required trust. He promised it was temporary, a day or two. No harm done. Weeks passed. Messages were ignored. The friend asked politely, then firmly, then publicly. Weeks. The borrower finally replied, offended.
And that is where this stopped being about access and became about respect.
Because borrowing without returning is theft in slow motion. And dismissing concern is not defense. It is escalation.
So I asked the Hive, was this honey? Or did it earn the stinger? Let's examine.
Honey or Stinger? Choose carefully. The friend didn't explode, didn't threaten, didn't smear. They asked, repeatedly.
The borrower? They benefited. They delayed, they minimized, and when confronted, they flipped the narrative.
Return what you borrowed, immediately. Apologize without qualifications. No but, you made me, it wasn't a big deal. Ownership is not humiliation, it is repair. And if you were the friend, you are not wrong for respect. Boundaries are not aggression. They are maintenance. This case is closed. Because next time, the consequence being a warning. More files are coming. More agents are being
New ninjas will reveal themselves, and every story will face the same question, Honey or Stinger?
Honey or Stinger? Choose carefully.
She came from the quiet storms, built a fire from the ground, turned a whisper to a warning. Now her voice shakes the town. Every setback was a lesson. Every doubt became a key, unlocking something bigger. That's the rise of Boss B. When the lights go low, her vision hits high. She built her whole damn network off a promise and a try. Every sunrise, every moment, she's stacking legacy. This ain't just a channel, this is BBTV. Boss B rising, BBTV's igniting. Turn the volume up, yeah, the whole world's invited. From the gravel road to the neon dream, she built an empire out of broken wings. Boss B rising, sky ain't even the ceiling. When she hits go live, everybody feels it. She's the queen of the comeback, the storm in the stream, crafting stories out of heartbeats, making visions out of dreams. Got thunder in the hustle, got a voice that cuts clean. Every mic she touches turns the power unseen. So let further spin the numbers, let the views rise slow or fast. Boss B doesn't measure wins by echoes of the past. This moment is a pivot, this season's history. Bow down to the founder of the BBTV dynasty. Boss B rising, BBTV's igniting. Turn the volume up, yeah, the whole world's invited. From the gravel roads to the neon dream, she built an empire out of broken wings. Boss B rising, sky ain't even the ceiling. When she hits go live, everybody feels it. She's got fire in the head, it's got truth in the frame. Got a heart that won't retire and a gift you can't name. Every loop, every letter, every dream she sets free. It's a love note to the world sign, Boss B. And the world keeps watching as the numbers climb, but she's counting all the moments, not the dollar signs. From the late night grind to the daylight scene, she's building something bigger than the algorithm's dream. Boss B rising, BBTV shining. Her story's rewriting, a legacy in real time. Boss B rising, BBTV's igniting. Turn the volume up, yeah, the whole world's invited. From the gravel roads to the neon dreams, she built an empire out of broken wings. Boss B rising, sky ain't even the ceiling. When she hits go live, everybody feels it. BBTV, where the stories breathe. BBTV, where the dreamers believe. Boss B rising, watch her take her place. This is BBTV, this is her grace.
Join Boss B for Ask a Bee Monday through Friday, 12 noon Central Standard Time and Jukebox Journey every Saturday, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Okay, we're back again. So after the rehab era forced Seether to confront whether the band could even continue, The next stage of their career became defined less by headlines and more by systems. Because survival, it required replacing improvisation. Jeez, I thought I fixed that. My motherboard's fractured. One of the most consequential relationships in that process was with Brendan O'Brien, the producer, whose reputation for demanding clarity, preparation, and accountability inside the studio effectively inserted a new authority figure into Seether's creative ecosystem. And that mattered because Sean Morgan had previously operated in environments where chaos and momentum could coexist for long stretches. But O'Brien's approach, it really reduced the margin for disorder by insisting on rehearsed parts, deliberate arrangements, and performances that could hold up under microscopic scrutiny, which meant that recording sessions, they stopped being loosely controlled. Let me pull my video up. Sorry. So creative explosions and started functioning more like audits. And that shift altered power dynamics inside the band because a producer who can veto takes, restructure songs, or delay sessions until standards are met is not just shaping sound. They are shaping behavior. And inside Seether, that pressure, it really forced internal conversations about professionalism and punctuality. And you know what? Who carried responsibility when deadlines slipped? And those conversations were not abstract. They were tied directly to budgets, label confidence, and whether future studio access would even be granted on the same terms. At the same time, the band's lineup remained fluid, reinforcing the idea that continuity was something they had to actively construct rather than assume. Because drummer Nick Oshiro eventually departed and was replaced by John Humphrey, as I mentioned before, a move that often gets summarized in a sentence, but carried major implications for touring rhythm and rehearsal culture. Since drummers aren't interchangeable parts in a live band, they determine tempo, endurance, and how tightly a set can be locked night after night. And bringing Humphrey in meant recalibrating everything from click track habits to travel routines. And that kind of recalibration, it tests whether a group has developed institutional memory or is reinventing itself it's every cycle. Okay. And by the stage Seether, I'm sorry, I hear something going on and I'm not sure if I like it. It has to do with the weather. Okay. It's the weather that's got me slow here, y'all. Sorry. So Seether was learning how to codify processes, right? Pre-tour rehearsals, set list discipline, sound check routines. The earlier versions. I don't, if y'all want to leave, go, because I'm just ruining this. That earlier version of the band had treated more casually. Okay. One of the most quietly ironic relationships turns in this entire story arrived with guitarist Troy McLaughlin. joining the lineup after his time with Evanescence, because that wasn't just a hiring decision. It was a professional collision with unresolved history still floating in the air. And what makes that noteworthy isn't tabloid drama, okay, so much as the level of maturity required to operate effectively in that situation. Because touring is an enclosed ecosystem where grudges can't be compartmentalized forever, okay? I guess they can, but not forever. And Seether choosing the move forward with McLaughlin, it signaled a shift towards pragmatism over emotion. Towards treating personal history as background noise rather than governing principle. And that was a meaningful evolution for a group that had once been destabilized by romantic and interpersonal fallout spilling into public view. And it suggests that by this phase, Sean and the rest of the band were consciously trying to build an environment where professionalism overrode narrative. Even when the narrative was unavoidable, another under-discussed element of this period is how management strategies evolved in parallel with creative ones. Because the people advising Seether after 2006 were no longer simply chasing growth curves. They were focused on durability, insurance, and long-term scheduling, reliability, which translates into fewer impulsive tour additions, more deliberate release cycles, and contingency planning that assumed disruption was possible rather than exceptional. And that institutional shift is often invisible to fans, but fundamental to why some bands age out of chaos and others disappear. Because it replaces heroic last-minute rescues with systems designed to prevent crisis from reaching that stage at all. And that operational maturity, it fed back into the internal trust. Since band members are more willing to recommit, they believe the infrastructure around them won't collapse the moment something goes wrong. Sean Morgan's sobriety, it remains central to all of this. Not just as personal victory, but as the access around which these new systems could actually function, because accountability frameworks only work if the people inside them are willing to participate. And sobriety altered how Sean engaged with producers, managers, and bandmates, shifting negotiations from damage control towards long-term planning. And that change allowed Seether to stop operating in emergency mode and start thinking in multi-year arcs again. And subtle but enormous psychological pivot that affects everything from songwriting, timelines to whether younger members feel safe hitching their futures to a project. What emerges is a version of Seether that looks less romantic but far more resilient. A band that had learned through repeated near collapses that, raw chemistry alone isn't enough to sustain a career, and that survival at scale requires accepting outside discipline, tolerating awkward professional overlaps, and rebuilding internal chemistry every time a new member enters the room. And that recalibration process, new drummer, new guitarist, stricter producer, more cautious management, it created a machine designed not for explosive growth, but for longevity, which is why the later years of Seether feel steadier on the surface, even though the path to that stability was paved with uncomfortable decisions about control and trust, and whether the people involved were willing to trade some spontaneity for the ability to keep going at all. I think that's a pretty good question. All right, that's where we're going to leave Seether tonight. Pardon me, not with a headline or a chart position, but with the long view of how a band survives itself through relationships and replacements, discipline, people choosing to keep showing up when it would be easier to walk away. And after all the problems I've had tonight, and sorry, my anxiety is up, so it makes me stutter and all this other kinds of stuff. Y'all have to forgive me, but I thank you for being here. I truly, truly appreciate you. And listen, before I let you go, make sure you stick around, because coming up, I do my little promos before I get out of here. All right, the latest. I think I'm going to go ahead and play that that last B Ninja, the first B Ninja debut. Yeah, okay. With the latest updates, you know, all that stuff. Everything's going on here on BBTV, and please go check out my friends at Tuber Chat. I will see you guys later. I'm so sorry. Take care, guys. Love you. Bye.
I want to take a minute to shout out Tuber Chat. If you're a creator who's tired of surface level advice, says, and actually wants to understand how YouTube works, that's the space. It's real conversations with real creators who are in the trenches, building channels, testing ideas. No posturing, no gatekeeping, no fake guru energy, just people sharing what's working, what isn't, and why.
If you're serious about growing, learning, and not doing this alone, check out Tuber Chat. The link is in the description. If you're enjoying this show, subscribing is the easiest way to support what's being built here on BBTV. You'll see the join button right next to subscribe. No pressure, no expectations, just an option for people who want to support the channel in a real way. We're live weekdays at 12 p.m. Central, and each day has its own focus. Same honesty, same voice, just different conversations depending on the day. And if you've got a story you want to share, send it in. Anonymous is always fine.
Tonight, the Hive recorded a new incident. Not a headline, not a rumor, a fracture.
Somewhere between loyalty and ego, between apology and entitlement, a human decided the rules didn't apply to them anymore, and the ripple reached us.
Honey or Stinger? Choose carefully. I am Boss B, commander of the Hive Order. When disputes escalate beyond reason, when lines blur until nobody remembers who crossed first.
Here is the case. A man borrowed something important from a friend. Not a car, not a jacket, but access. A password. A shared account. Favor that required trust. He promised it was temporary, a day or two. No harm done. Weeks passed. Messages were ignored. The friend asked politely, then firmly, then publicly. Weeks. The borrower finally replied, offended.
And that is where this stopped being about access and became about respect.
Because borrowing without returning is theft in slow motion. And dismissing concern is not defense. It is escalation.
So I asked the Hive, was this honey? Or did it earn the stinger? Let's examine.
Honey or Stinger? Choose carefully. The friend didn't explode, didn't threaten, didn't smear. They asked, repeatedly.
Borrower? They benefited. They delayed. They minimized. And when confronted, they flipped the narrative.
Return what you borrowed, immediately. Apologize without qualifications. No but, you made me, it wasn't a big deal. Ownership is not humiliation, it is repair. And if you were the friend, you are not wrong for respect. Boundaries are not aggression. They are maintenance. This case is closed. Because next time, the consequence needs a warning. More files are coming. More agents are being
New ninjas will reveal themselves, and every story will face the same question, honey or stinger.
Honey or stinger? Choose carefully.
This ain't just a channel, this is BBTV. Boss be rising, BBTV.